I want to talk about imposter syndrome for a little bit. It's come up a few times in some one-on-one calls that I've done, and I've noticed that it's something that we all struggle with. It's not just specific to software developers. I think everyone at some point in time probably faces a little bit of imposter syndrome, and I know that it's very common in software development, and I actually want to talk about like some of the imposter syndrome that I'm experiencing like right now with just trying to make YouTube work and trying to be an entrepreneur and build some SaaS ideas, and then also like imposter syndrome that I've had with learning how to code and being a software developer, and just everything about imposter syndrome and what I've experienced with it. It's one of those things that feels like it never goes away. I feel like I'm just never gonna know enough, and I'm always gonna feel like I'm not smart enough or good enough, or when I actually do accomplish some things and I'm able to achieve things, that I'm gonna feel like I didn't earn it, or that I got lucky, or that it's survivorship bias, which I talked about recently. I think all of that boils down to some form of imposter syndrome. With software development, I still feel it now. I've been writing code and I've been building something, and it feels very much like I don't know what I'm doing. I've been using a lot of ChatGPT and Claude and any AI tool that I can use. I feel like it's writing the code for me, and I'm just code reviewing it and copying and pasting what it gives me into my code base. And if it works, it works, and I move on to the next thing. And I notice that some of the people who are real developers on Twitter are talking about not using Copilot anymore, and people are trying to get away from the AI tools, and here I am leaning into them more. It made me think about like a lot of senior level developers that I've worked with in the past that I just never feel like I'm smart enough and I will never be on their level. Now it's weird because I feel like I'm not even a real software developer anymore. I don't do it as a living. I haven't done it professionally for, I don't know, like a year and a half, almost 2 years now, because my last job was a design role. I feel like I'm a fraud. I get comments where people are like, oh, you're not even a programmer. You're just putting on an act, which is funny because I don't know if that would be possible. I'm sure it would be, but I don't know if I could fake as much as I would have had to fake to be able to know all the lingo and terminology that I know, and actually have developers that I've interviewed and talked with on my channel and all the other things that I talk about. And I know that I don't get into like technical know-how, and I don't really get into writing code on this channel, although I've gone through some of the tutorials of like Free Code Camp and the Next.js tutorial, and I've walked through those things, but I've never written any code of my own, and I don't really do how-tos or courses or anything like that on programming. So I can understand why some people might think that I'm not even really a software developer. But if there's one person that thinks that I'm a fraud more than anyone else, is myself. I still don't know how I was able to accomplish what I've accomplished, and how I was able to learn how to code, how I was able to get a job, how I was able to get another job, and then build up my salary to 6 figures, and all that still feels very much like maybe I did get lucky. I really don't know. I don't know how I got to where I am, but I know that I've worked really hard for it. But then when I see people who I consider to be much smarter developers, whether they be social media influencers or tech Twitter influencers or other YouTubers who I feel like could 10x me any day, and I feel like they understand concepts that I can't wrap my head around, and like I don't even know data structures and algorithms, right? Like it's crazy to think. There's definitely people that are way smarter than me, and I guess maybe my work ethic has helped me a lot with that. But nonetheless, it's still really hard for me to feel like I've earned this sometimes and that I'm not a fraud. And then to like talk about a little bit of like YouTube and whatnot. And I'll even throw in jiu-jitsu in the mix, right? Because I'm a purple belt and I've been training for a really long time, but then I'll go against some really young like wrestler MMA guys who don't really train a lot of jiu-jitsu, and they'll smash me, and then it makes me feel like, man, this belt around my waist is a lie also. And I've felt it there as well, where it's just like you go up against some young guy who's been training for a few years, and you got all this experience under your belt, and you've been training like twice as long or 3 times as long as they have, and they just kick your ass, and like that hurts your ego, but then it also makes you question yourself a bit. And then with YouTube too, it's another area where I feel a lot of imposter syndrome. Like I look and I see my subscriber count, and I see like I have videos that have millions of views, and I'm just like, how the hell did that happen? Like, who's watched my stuff like that? Like, why would anybody watch me? Like, I'm not special. I don't make the best videos. I don't feel like I deserve the growth that I've had. When I see other people who put a ton of work and effort into their videos and they don't get nearly as many views as I do. And then on the flip side, now that I'm not getting that many views and I'm starting to see like my numbers aren't what they were at one point, and then I see people who are just coming up, who are crushing it and just getting so many views and growing at a rapid rate, or even people who I feel aren't the best, but are just doing way better than me. And, that's a little bit of haterism there, but nonetheless, it's normal for us to want to compare ourselves to other people. And I think that's where imposter syndrome comes from, is when you really start comparing yourself to other people. And here's a quote that I'm going to paraphrase, and I think it was, if you really want to feel like a failure, compare yourself to others. That's so true, because I feel so often that I'm a failure, mostly when I start seeing what the next person has and the people that are doing a little bit better than me. And I don't think about like where I was a few years ago. If I took a step back and I looked at my life 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I could see how much I've improved, and I can see that I'm just so much better than I was before. And it all goes back to the same stuff I was talking about, like with coding. If I think about how I was when I was just starting out, how little I knew, how I barely understood any of the concepts, how I felt like nothing that I was learning was sticking, and everything was way beyond my skill level. And after doing it for a while, like things that used to be super difficult for me to understand are like very simple for me now. I believe that that's what it is with everything. And, things that I didn't understand in jiu-jitsu, moves that I couldn't do, I do them now without even thinking about them. Things that were difficult for me with YouTube, like editing a video or just feeling confident on camera, like those things, if I compare myself now to how I was when I first started all of these things that I've talked about, I'll realize like how much more I've improved, and I realize how much more I've grown and how much better I am. But when I compare myself to other people, I feel inadequate. I feel like it's not enough. I feel like I'll never be good enough. And I think that when it comes down to imposter syndrome, you can only really be better than who you were before. And we're always going to feel like we're just not good enough, especially if you're striving for more stuff. And I think that that's a good thing. I think imposter syndrome is good because if you start to feel like you're the best at something, then you're going to get lazy, and you're probably going to let things start to slip, and you're not going to stay on top of yourself, and you're going to be too easy on yourself, and you're not going to focus on things the way that you focused on when you were hungry and wanting to learn and told yourself that you weren't good enough. If you start to think that you're great at everything, then you're not going to continue to work as hard as you once did to be good at something. I think that we should all embrace imposter syndrome, and I'm talking about myself as well here. When I do start to experience it, and I do start to feel that I'm not good enough, and I do start to feel like I don't belong here, or I didn't earn the things that I have, I gotta like lean into that and say, no, that's good. I want to feel that way because I want to start working harder so that I can feel that same way in a few years from now, after I've accomplished a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm working towards now that I feel like I'm an imposter in. Like the building SaaSes, that's something that is completely new to me. I've consumed a bunch of content on it. I'm trying to work on it myself now. Call myself an indie hacker, and I feel like I'm a fraud because I'm not. I haven't even launched anything yet. So I'm not an indie hacker, but I want to be. And I think that there's a bit of fake it till you make it that's involved with trying to get to what you want to accomplish. You can't fake it too much because you'll never get to the make it part. You'll just be faking it the whole way, and that'll catch up to you sooner or later. But I do think that you have to be able to convince yourself that you can do it. And I think that's where the fake it part comes in. If you can convince yourself that you can do it, and you start saying that that's what you're going to be or that's what you're going to do, you manifest that. And I feel funny using the term manifestation, but I notice that stuff keeps coming around in my life a lot. And I'm starting to realize that there's a lot of things that I manifested that I have worked towards and have done. And now I'm starting to embrace that a little bit more and realizing that if you do believe something and you do work towards something and you want something, that if you focus on that enough, you're going to get it. Whether or not we feel like imposters in the process and we feel like we don't deserve it or we didn't earn it when we finally get to it, that doesn't matter, because the truth is I am a self-taught programmer. I did it for over 6 years professionally, and I am a YouTuber. I have a channel with 250,000 subscribers, and I've got 400 plus videos out, and I've made money doing this, and I'm using this now to support myself and my family as I travel. And I am a jiu-jitsu purple belt. I busted my ass doing that. I've got broken bones and sprained ligaments and surgery on my knee because of that stuff, and a little bit of cauliflower in this year. All of those things are things that I have done, and whether or not I feel like I've earned it or I have deserved those things or I am any of those things doesn't matter, because the proof is there, and I just shouldn't be so hard on myself sometimes. And maybe that's the point of this video, is don't be too hard on yourself. If you're feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, it's perfectly all right. That means you're headed in the right direction. All right, with all that said, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.